I go, dude, I think we just broke the internet. I feel like Paul Revere or whatever screaming like, the advertisers are coming. I anoint you. You are now a podcaster.
Old man shakes fist at clouds.
It's not a podcast unless there's an RSS feed.
Get to it fast. Right here on the Anycast. Make it strong, make it last. Right here on the Anycast.
All right, I am here today with somebody who can only be described as a Hall of Fame podcasting legend, if I'm not mistaken.
That's it. 2018. They'll let anybody in there.
Do you make people greet you? Do you get airlines to call you that? Is that something you can put in your airline profile?
I'm really bummed. I usually don't, and there's no discount at the grocery store. There's no groupies in podcasting. It's just like, all right, well, the only thing is, it's behind me, and it's this little star thing at the top.
Yeah,
I should have that in my bedroom, because if in the event anybody ever broke into my house, like I could kill somebody with that award.
Absolutely.
The top of that thing is very pointy.
Yes, it could be a Christmas tree decoration too.
It could. I just need some tinsel on that and be good to go.
Perfect. Well, Dave, for those who don't know you, which would be almost hard to believe if you're here listening to a podcast episode, give us 2 minutes. How did you get here? Where did you come from? What are you selling? And then people can fast forward 2 minutes and skip the sale and get right to the good stuff.
There you go. Well, I started back in podcasting in 2005, but before that, I spent decades. I remember teaching people how to send email, hence the gray hair. I was making websites in Microsoft Front Page and things like that. But I started podcasting in 2005, and what really got me hooked in is I pieces parted one together, and I was doing a podcast for musicians, and a guy in Nuremberg, Germany sent me a voicemail, and I went, wait a minute, hold on. I'm in the middle of Cowtown, Ohio, and this guy's on the other side of the planet. He not only found my podcast, but liked it and sent me a voicemail. And I grabbed my little podcasting flag. I claim podcasting in the name of Dave, and went to town. So back then it was really ugly and awful, and people were like, do I need an iPod to listen to that? And you're like, no, just the internet and speakers. And I've been doing that, launched the School of Podcasting in 2005. And over the years, it's gone through different iterations. Paul was on the show, Paul Culligan. And you need an honest friend to say, hey, Dave, here's what people are saying about the School of Podcasting. And I'm like, what? He goes, the good news is, everything you need is there. And he goes, and the bad news is, he goes, everything is there. He goes, you need to streamline some of that stuff. So it was kind of ugly at the beginning. I had no idea what I was doing. I'd never had a membership site. And over the years, it's been fun. I still love the fact that the guy at my old computer teaching gig, I said, we should start teaching podcasting here. And he's like, yeah, it's a fad. And I was like, I still want to find him. Tom Bender, wherever you are.
Yeah.
Ha, I say to you. And over the years, after I'd taught apparently everyone how to do Microsoft Excel and Word, that gig kind of dried up. And so I was walking to my car after being let go, and I called Rob Walsh from Libsyn because I'd known him. I'd done a podcast with him, and I said, I have good news and bad news. And he's like, oh, I'll play. What's the bad news? I go, I just lost my job. And he said, oh, what's the good news? I said, I'm available to work for you. And luckily enough, they hired me. I was at Libsyn for 8 years. And so along the way, I got hired at a college before Libsyn. I got to be a professor, but it was some rinky-dink college in Cleveland that didn't last long. But I got that gig because they said, what do you do in your free time? And I said, oh, I play the guitar, I ride my bike, and I podcast. And they went, you podcast? Because again, back in 2008, that was a big deal.
Yeah.
And so, along the ways, now I'm at Podpage, which is a website building tool for podcasters. You basically throw in your RSS feed, and we spit out a great looking website. And my favorite thing, we interviewed one of our customers last week, and they said, we're asking them, like, what do you do when you log into Podpage? And he goes, fellas, I haven't logged into Podpage in about, I don't know, probably 6 weeks. He goes, you guys kind of do everything for me. And we're like, that's a good answer. So it's been fun. And along the way, I have the School of Podcasting, which teaches people how to plan, launch, and grow your podcast. I did get a book deal along the way. So if you want to learn how to monetize your show, check out Profit From Your Podcast, available at profitfromyourpodcast.com. And I think that's all the pitching and history really you need. It's been fun. The Hall of Fame thing is still kind of a And it's funny because for the longest time, I didn't really bring it up.
Mm.
And I had a business coach, and he goes, "Why aren't you saying that you're in the Hall of Fame?" And I'm going, "I don't know. Yeah, you know how that goes. You're like self-promotion." And he goes, "How many people can say that?" And I go, "At the time, I think there were 15." And he's like, "Yeah, say it every time you open up your mouth." So yeah, that was a fun time.
That's awesome. Well, and it's coming back now, right? There's an award coming this year in January, maybe?
Yeah, in January, they brought it back. That went away for a little bit because it turns out it's expensive. And we kept looking for sponsors because it's a kind of a cool gala and people like have to wear a tie, that kind of thing. And so it was that podcast movement, and then COVID, that was another thing that kind of got in the way. And so we brought it back last year, and we're doing it again in January at PodFest.
Awesome. Just thinking about that, your history, it's got the right arc of every hero story, probably. But starting out, people didn't have the school of podcasting to refer to. Take us back. I mean, I was there barely, sort of. I was there like 2006. I think we sort of embraced podcasting. I was the same thing that you just nod somebody on. Like somebody told me about it in like early 2005, and I was like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Please don't ever talk to me about this again. And then like in 2006, it was like CacheFly hosts 8 of the top 10 podcasts on the iTunes store. But in those days, it was fair to say like a desert of information if you wanted to start a podcast.
Yeah, when I first found out about it, I was doing this podcast for musicians, and I had networked with this guy, and he had gone to this big marketing conference, and he said, and again, this kind of dates me. He goes, "You know how you missed the MySpace boat?" And I go, I had a little, and I go, yeah, don't rub it in. He's like, "I've seen the next big thing." And I go, "Great, what is it?" And he goes, "Podcasting." And I went to Google, and I typed in podcasting, and there was 1.5 pages. And I go, "Wait, how do you spell this?" He's like, "POD, just casting." And I go, "Dude, I think we just broke the internet. There's nothing on this anywhere." And so I had to kind of piece this part one together. I found some bizarre software called Feed for All that would make a feed, and then I had to FTP the feed. It was just everything was just, like, "Grandma, we're going to make it from scratch," and it was just, I remember I found this software, and one of the things that really kind of was hooking me in, and it was called Juice, and it had this big picture of a lemon on it, and I downloaded it, and they had a preloaded podcast in there, and I hit play, and out came the voice of one Adam Curry, and I'm like, "Hey, I know that guy from the Headbangers Ball," and I was like, "Oh, wow, this is cool." And so I finally didn't really even understand the process. I'm just going by the directions. Do this, put this, copy this feed thing into here, blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden my file, I saw it download, and because again, this is, pre bandwidth, then I see it download, and and I was like, "Oh, I get it." And that's when the light bulb came on. And it's kind of interesting because, if you give a podcast to a salesman, they're going to see it as a great sales tool. If you give it to, a poet, you gave one to a teacher. And so for me, I was like, "Oh man, we're going to learn about everybody's cultures, and this is going to be just this amazing education tool."
Yeah.
And I was just sucked in. And so that's when I had a blog, and I had been, just to give you the idea of the technology, I was doing interviews on the phone. I tried this, and I went to Radio Shack, which of course doesn't exist anymore. Got the old suction cup recorder and put that into there, and then would put the I think I might have even recorded the interview on a cassette, maybe. I don't have to go back and double check that, but it was painful. Wasn't using WordPress yet. Back then I was using Dreamweaver for my websites. And so when I found out that WordPress not only was an easy way to, build a website, because back then I'd be out at somebody's house, I'd get a call from a client. They're like, "Hey, can you update the page to the thing?" And you're like, "Sure, I'll do it as soon as I go home," because I had to be in front of my computer. And so WordPress, I could update websites from anywhere. Oh, and they had an RSS feed. And so I was like, "Oh, this is going to make this a whole lot easier." And then there was a plugin called, I think it back in the day was PodPress, and it got super popular because when Apple came along, we're all like, "How are we going to get this extra Apple stuff that you got to put into your feed?" And along came PodPress, and it came like the way to make a podcast, and the poor guy that's developing the plugin is getting paid, oh, that's right, nothing, pretty much. You know, that 0.001% of people who are giving him $10 via PayPal.
Yeah.
And the one day he just said, yeah, I'm done. This is too much work and I'm not getting paid. See you, bye. And what was interesting is WordPress keeps updating, of course. And at one point, the company that owns WordPress, Automatic, had to go in and update the plugin. Because if they put out the next update, they're going to break thousands of people's websites.
Yep.
And then eventually Blueberry kind of took it over and turned it into PowerPress, which is still one of the better plugins for if you're going to use WordPress and you want to use some sort of plugin for your feed, that's the way to go. But yeah, it was ugly. I remember I would spend 3 minutes explaining to people what a podcast was and then say, do you want to do one? And they'd go, no. Which is exactly what you said. You're like, I don't know what this is. You're a nerd. Get out of here. You know. So yeah, it was ugly, but I remember when Apple came on, because people talk about hockey stick growth, and I've actually seen authentic. They're like, yes, this is now in Apple iTunes is now adopted podcasting, and I went into my stats, and it was just like a ski slope. It was amazing. So yeah. It was fun.
Back in the days when your audience found you just by opening iTunes.
Yeah, there was only so many. And I remember the very first podcast event was in, I want to say Ontario, California.
Ontario.
Yeah. And it was weird because I remember it was like at a Holiday Inn. And I remember walking in and I'm like, I'm looking for the podcasting thing. And they're like, oh, they're down in the bar. And I walked in and I'm like, is this the podcasting thing? And there's like 15 people in there. And I remember CC Chapman was a guy, did a show called Accident Hash. And he walked in, because back then we were all playing music. And he walked in, he's like, is this the podcasting thing? And we're like, yeah. And he's like, oh, cool, I'm CC Chapman. And it was like cheers. Everybody in the room was like, oh, CC, what's up? Like we all knew, because there were only so many podcasts. We all knew each other. Mm. And yeah, it was amazing. I want to bring that back. They had a tool called the PodSafe Music Network. And musicians could upload their music there, and you basically just had to say this music came from the PodSafe Music Network, which I always thought was weird. Like, shouldn't we be promoting the musician?
Plug the artist.
Yeah, but that was great. And when after Mevio/Pod Show had burned through 38 million and they went away, so did the PodSafe Music Network. And I'm like, oh, that was a great idea. Can we bring that back with some sort of monetization plan to keep it around?
Yeah. They have that for images now, right? Like you can go get either royalty free or pay a royalty image subscriptions. I'm surprised there's not a better source for podcasting today.
Yeah. I mean, it was like anything else. Some of the music was some out of tune person on a Casio keyboard, so you had to kind of sift through. But there was a guy named Brother Love back then. And Brother Love was kind of David Lee Roth-ish, kind of like he'd walk in, he'd be like, hey people, what's going on? I'm Brother Love. Yeah, what's going to do? Like, and I remember once I asked him to do like an ID for my show was called The Marketing Musician. And he's like, rockin'. This is Brother. And I was like, okay, he's high energy dude. He is now in Nashville on the radio, which is kind of fun.
Okay.
But because of the PodSafe Music Network, and because you had this really small community, like that guy was like the Beatles at the time. I remember he did a concert at one of the events. Yeah. Because, we were in our own little bubble, and in our bubble, that guy, and he was good. He was fun and exciting. So it was, you get your little bubbles, and we're still in our bubble got bigger is all.
Yeah. It's still a small bubble in the universe, which I think it's where the opportunity is, obviously. But before we talk about today an opportunity, the real question is, when was the last time you listened to your first podcast?
3 years ago, probably. Okay. Maybe 2.
And
it's awful, which is par for the course. The very first one from the then musician Cyber Cooler, that was the original name, and then cyber became synonymous with sex, so I dropped it to Musicians Cooler, had a big picture of a water cooler, tagline, where musicians come to trade advice, and people are still going, so it's like a wine cooler? And I'm like, okay, And then I rebranded it again to the Marketing Musician. But yeah, I remember I was somewhat proud that you could say and I started it off with a rap song, and I'm not even like remotely, nothing against rap, it's just not my jam.
Mhm.
But I had been doing some sort of music battling thing, and this guy had won, so I used him for like my opening intro, and it's just bad. And I'm explaining, kind of doing behind the scenes, like, so I can say here, and later, I don't know, maybe like it's gonna, and I was just like, oh, just spit it out, so it was just obvious that I was just riffing off the top of my head.
Yeah.
And it's weird because back then I think my episodes were only, it was like one topic, and it was like maybe 10 to 15 minutes. And I went to one of the first events and got to meet somebody who would actually listen to my show. And I said, oh, cool. And they go like, there's only one thing I need you to do with your show. And I go, what's that? And he goes, make it longer. He goes, my commute's like at least 20 minutes. And I was like, that's a lot of Dave, man. And he's like, well, it's good. And I'm like, okay.
I ran out of content at the 3-minute mark. What do you mean I got to make it 20 minutes?
Yeah. It's one of my favorites is when I hit play on a new podcast and they're like, hey, it's Thursday. I'm not really sure what we're going to talk about, but I promised you a show every Thursday. So here it comes. And I'm like, oh, wow, this guy's going to waste 20 minutes of my time. So I instantly hit stop on that. But yeah.
Do you have any other podcast red flags? Like so I don't know what I'm going to talk about as a red flag.
Yeah. The one that really just makes me cringe is when, like, you were very specific. You said, hey, take me back to 2005. Like, what was that like? What I love is, so Matt, thanks for coming on the show. Tell us a little bit about yourself. And I'm just like, oh, like there's no target there. So if somebody said that to me, hey, Dave, tell us a little bit about yourself, I could go, well, I was born and raised in Akron, Ohio. I had a paper route when I was 13. My dog's name was Butch. Like, and people will do that. And so I always tell like before we started today, you kind of gave me some insights on where we're going, and people don't. They're just like, hey, Dave, thanks for coming on the show. And they just kind of go, and the guest doesn't know like who they're talking to. Now they should, in theory. Like, I listened to your show, I went over and listened to a couple episodes, but some people don't. So you need to let them know, like, hey, here's why you're here. Like, I had a musician on my podcasting show, and I said, look, I could bring you on to talk about work-life balance because she had kids. I could talk about getting your music on the radio. I said, but you're here because I always tell my audience, figure out what your audience wants and give it to them. And you have been doing that by getting your music streamed on Netflix and used in movies and things like that, because it's hard for musicians to make money. And she had been doing this. She kind of transitioned from, she'd been on 2 labels, and it's the music industry, so that doesn't last long.
Yeah.
And so I let her know why she came on. And so there's that. The endless chit chat. I love when the title is amazing, right? If we'll use the old Steve Martin joke, how to turn dog poop into gold, right? You're like, oh, I'm definitely clicking on that title.
Yeah.
But then they start off and they're like, hey, Matt, what's up? And Matt's like, hey, I'm cool, Dave. What are you doing there? You sipping some orange Gatorade? And as soon as you say orange Gatorade, I go, orange Gatorade. And the audience is going, I have no idea what they're talking about.
Yeah.
But Matt and Dave have this thing about orange Gatorade back in 92, and it's off and off. Or they'll be like, no, I'm good. What have you been up to? Oh, I don't know. I was thinking about cleaning the house, and then the cat was scratching the couch. And you're just like, I don't like, I always look at the title of the episode as a promise. This is what we're going to talk about. And that doesn't mean I'm anti chit chat. I listened to a show called, it's the Pod News Weekly Review.
Mm-hmm.
And at the very end, it's Sam Sethi and James Cridlin. Then they go, well, what have you been up to this week? And then it'll be like, well, I put up a new fence in my backyard and whatever. So, because if you think about it, at that point, the super fans are still there. They're listening to the very end. And those are the people that care about you had to take the dog to the vet.
Right.
But
you run the blooper reel at the end of the movie, not up front, right? Like
exactly.
Yeah.
So there's that. And then just in terms of equipment, don't use your built-in laptop microphone. That's just not good. It's going to make you sound like you're in a cave, in a fishbowl, something of that nature.
Yeah.
So, and the thing I'm seeing now, I'm not anti-AI at all, but I saw somebody yesterday that was like, hey, is there any tool that I can upload, this file to, and it can find a quote? And so it wasn't just find the quote and put it at the beginning of this episode. They basically wanted to have AI edit the show 100%. And I don't know any AI that works 100%. It's all usually 80, 90%, and then you got to go in and tweak.
Yeah.
And so AI is a great tool. I've used it for quite a few things, but in the end, you don't want to AI yourself right out of the show, because I know there's Google Notebook with my good friends Kyle and Sheila is who I've named those two people.
Yeah.
But
It's funny, they talk to me too.
yeah, it's amazing. I was interviewing somebody who had sent me a PDF of their book. So I just uploaded the book to them, and instead of having to read the book, I had Kyle and Sheila give me the kind of highlights of it, which gave me enough to come up with some really good questions. So there's a use for it, but in the end, the thing that makes podcasting different than radio, he's before my time, which is, I'm happy I can say something was before my time, but for those of you who have seen the movie American Graffiti back in the day, there was Wolfman Jack, baby, what's going on the day? So Wolfman Jack was a personality. Back then, even when I was growing up in the 70s, we have a station here in Cleveland, WMMS. It was very personality driven. And I remember Denny Sanders and Kid Leo and all these people, and they've just washed any personality. If you listen, there's a easy listening station here in Ohio, and it's literally Siri is the DJ.
Yeah.
She'd be like, something will come on and Eddie Money, 2 tickets to paradise. And then they'll play a song, and then it's 15 minutes of ads. And I'm like, we don't want to strip the personality out of podcasting. That's what made it, when it first came on the scene, the fact that we weren't all talking like this. Okay, traffic and weather on the 10s. Like, we just talk normal.
Yeah.
And people are like, oh, this is great. And the fact that now you're getting information that you can't get anyplace else. So you're like, wait a minute, you're doing a deep dive into whatever it is. Like, I can't get that on TV or on a radio or on a book or magazine.
Yeah.
And so that's really what made it take off, which is what's starting to bother me is all those advertisers who are not making their money back on radio anymore are trying to take the same model and put it into podcasting. And that's just not, I'm not anti-advertising, but it's one of those things where I'm not a genius. I predicted last year that the price of ads for what they call programmatic, which are measured by how many downloads per thousand, I go, that's going to go down. Like, the price, you'll make less money for your ads. And people are like, why do you think that? And I go, because it used to be, there weren't that many people that had the technology to insert ads in post-production into your file. And I go, that has greatly increased. So everybody now can take ads. So now the supply
inventory.
It's like, so somebody can go to a show and go, I'm going to give you peanuts to put this ad into your show. And the first person goes, no way. Are you kidding me? And they just go down the line. And then eventually they find somebody that goes, oh, well, it's better than a poke in the eye. So yeah, I'll take that deal.
Yeah.
And it's a race to the bottom. And I'm like, does anybody remember banner ads? I remember there was when not everybody had a website, you could make some decent money with banner ads on your website.
Yeah.
And now everybody's, again, inventory. And I'm like, oh, that's just, and what happens then is when the price goes down, the guys that are making a living with those ads, either and I've seen this with 3 shows, all of a sudden they have a new type of show. Hey, on Sundays, we're doing this. And you're like, really? Okay. Or they just cram more ads into their episodes. And I'm like, oh, congratulations. We've turned podcasting into radio.
Yeah.
So that's what I keep trying to, I feel like, Paul Revere or whatever screaming like, the advertisers are coming. Everyone be careful. Don't do that. Don't turn it into radio.
Is there a way to stop that? Or is that the nature of the beast?
It's funny because when I say things like that, they're like, oh, well, it's Dave. He's curmudgeon is the phrase. It's a loving term, but yeah, he's an old curmudgeon. Like, I still don't say YouTube is a podcast. You're a YouTuber.
Old man shakes fist at cloud.
That's it.
Yeah.
It's not a podcast unless there's an RSS feed.
Yeah.
Can we stop that? Here's why. There's just lots of money from companies that want to reach the podcasting space. And it's hard to turn down big checks. And the other thing is I keep pointing out to people that whatever it was, probably a year or two ago, when YouTube came out and said, we're adding podcasts to YouTube. And I'm like, wait, are they going to add an RSS feed to YouTube? This is going to be amazing. Like, no. All they did was they went over to all of their YouTubers and said, if we could all gather in the front, please, great. And maybe somebody brought out a sword and they went,
We anoint you.
Yes, I anoint you. You are now a podcaster. And I'm like, wait, what? And then I'm like, well, why did they do that? Well, it turns out TikTok is taking a big bite out of their ad marketing thing. And they're like, we got to get somebody talking about YouTube again. I don't know. Larry, what do you got over there in the corner? Larry, wake up. And Larry was like, podcasting's pretty hot. And they're like, that's it. Everyone is now a podcast on YouTube. And I was like, I don't care. Like, if you want to call a YouTuber a podcaster until you send out a report that says the number one way to get your podcast in giant quotation marks discovered is to put it on YouTube. And I'm like, so you're saying what used to be a YouTuber is being discovered on YouTube. And I'm like, do you realize how silly that sounds? The number one place to find a YouTuber is on YouTube. And I'm like, yeah, of course it is. So it's kind of confusing. And then there was a report that they said, well, we're calling it a podcast because the audience said it's a podcast. And I'm like, yeah, but the audience is wrong. I mean, I think I say I'm a male model. Nope. I say my skateboard is a car because it has wheels and it gets me from one place and back. I'm like, no, they have the wrong definition. And in the same way that country music is now the number one genre. Have you listened to country music lately? It's AC/DC with a banjo in the back, maybe a fiddle, and the guy's got a twang. I'm like, no, that's rock. But they changed the definition and it changed the report. So when you say YouTube is a podcast and then come out and say the number one way to consume podcasts is YouTube, I'm like, So it's that report that I now go, that's where I shake my fist at the clouds.
In that case, then, what makes it, like, in your mind, what makes a podcast a podcast? Is it's wrapped in an RSS feed?
Yep, that's it. That's really it. And so that's where I kind of go, I don't really care, and neither does the audience. I mean, the audience doesn't care, but it's for reporting. So I'm like, they should be a report on YouTubers and how they are reaching people, and then there should be a report on podcasters. And because before there was YouTube, there were video podcasts. Some of the early days, there was a guy, Ask a Ninja, that eventually ended up on Netflix for a while. So it's one of those things where I like, Dave, who cares? And I'm like, I only care when the report comes out because it's like a Barry Bonds. There's an asterisk, right? Most of those podcasts aren't in Apple Podcasts, and right. So it's that's the only reason I try not to die on that hill, but I'm just like, hey, that report just came out. This is the thing I'm talking about. This is why I'm not really, I'll take some of this stuff, but that stat about, YouTube being the number one way to find a podcast, I'm like, not sure I'm buying that.
Sure. So, I mean, the reason people gravitate might be the right word, but the reason you end up putting, like, this show ends up on YouTube, and the reason is very simple, which is simply so that the algorithm can maybe find us a few more people that would hear the show or watch the show, as the case may be. Is there a risk that when you go down that road, you end up now, like, there's this theory that anytime you put an intermediary between you and your goal, you stop trying to accomplish your goal and you start trying to please the intermediary, right? Like, I want to be closer to God, so I go to church. Right. Well, now you're just trying to please the church. God is like sort of not.
He's a byproduct.
He's a byproduct of it, right? Or I'm going to put this system into my business because I want to run a great business. As soon as you do that, you stop trying to run a great business and you're just trying to make the system work. When you put the algorithm, in between you and your audience, are people at risk of going down the road of trying to please the algorithm instead of trying to make content for the audience?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's there are two things. Number one, I'll have somebody come up to me and say, I want to do this podcast. And I'm like, great. And they'll just tell me of this great idea. I'm like, oh, that is so unique and people are going to love it. And I'm like, great. I'm like, what's stopping you? And they're like, I don't want to do video. And I'll be like, so don't do video. And they're like, no, I have to do video. Everybody says I have to do video. And I go, realize that everybody is YouTube. saying you have to do video. So that's the first thing. And yeah, I always say it's funny because they'll start an audio podcast and then they start going on YouTube to promote, like, oh, I'm going to start YouTube to promote the audio. And then they have to figure out, well, how am I going to promote YouTube so that YouTube grows, so that will then promote and I'm like, it's like starting really a third podcast, because you have your content and audio, now you've got video, and now you have to learn the algorithm. Because now for me, I am on YouTube because it's free. There is an algorithm, and some people like to see, some people like to listen. So if you want to be on video, by all means, oh my God, be on YouTube. It'd be stupid not to. But I also am aware that in some cases I've heard where 70% of this one person's traffic came from the algorithm. Well, Google giveth, or YouTube giveth, and YouTube also taketh away. And I'm like, that's the part that makes me very scary about relying on an algorithm. But I had a member of the School of Podcasting, and she had great success with YouTube Shorts, and it was actually growing other things. But she was working insane hours and was just all about the thumbnail and the title. And she said, it's a whole other skill. She goes, the video part is not that hard. You know, you get a camera and some lights and you talk into it and you're good to go. She goes, but really understanding how the fact that something in the algorithm can read your facial expression, which is kind of creepy. So they're looking at, are you happy or sad with your giant mouth open shot, the shot, that whole 9 yards, and the algorithm and the keywords and comments. So it's a whole other thing. And that it was about maybe the beginning of this year or the end of last year. There were a bunch of people who had been on YouTube and very successful, and they all left at like the same time, creating people to go, oh my God, is there something wrong with YouTube? And I'm like, no, these guys were OGs in YouTube land. And like the one guy said, he goes, I have a 2-year-old that doesn't know who I am, because it's just a lot of time and a lot of effort. So,
Yeah.
But if you want to be popular, and with YouTube, if the way you monetize on YouTube for many people is, the ads, well, the more ads and the more impressions, the more money you make. So it makes sense. And, it's just, so then you got to get wrapped up, and it's easy to get sucked into serving the algorithm and not serving the listener.
Is there a way for people to find a balance, or like because obviously you don't want to not have the algorithm, right? Like you don't want to just say, you know what, because I'd have to gamify it, because I'd have to put in this more work, I don't even want to try it. It's probably like a recipe for failure, especially if you're trying to launch a new show, right? Like you want to get all the opportunities, most at bats you can get with people to hear the show. So how would you coach people to find that balance?
Well, I always it's funny when I have somebody come on to like look at my SEO on the School of Podcasting site, and they always go, wow, you're actually ranking pretty decent. And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, well, what are you using? And I go, I write for people. I write blog posts in my show notes for people. And so I would take that same approach at YouTube and make your videos for people. So I live on Reddit and Facebook, back in the day, Quora, and I work for podcasting companies. So I'm always listening to what are people talking about, because then I don't have to guess, I wonder if they're going to like this. I know this is what they need. So there's that. And then the balance is, okay, I need to study how to make a thumbnail and what's going to work. And, and that, of course, the fun part is you'll get it down, and then in about 3 months it'll change. But that's part of the deal. And then come up with a title. And that's where I like AI not to, in many cases, not to use verbatim their title, but I'll be like, hey, here's my transcript of my podcast. Give me 15 titles of this. And, 13 of those are going to be awful, and 2 of them are going to be pretty good. And I'm like, ooh, but if I take part of this one and part of that one and Frankenstein together a title, because to me, and again, there are all sorts of AI tools that, will rate your title and such, and they're okay. But my basic metric is, which one of these do I want to click more?
Right.
Because that's really in the end what we want. We want somebody to click it. And so I'll spend the time to do that. Now, the people that are doing this for a living are swapping out their thumbnails daily, and they're tracking this and that. And that's where, do what you can, but you need to keep your health in mind. One of the things I always tell people when it comes to podcasting, it's like a three-legged stool. And I go, it's your health, your attitude, and the support of the people around you. Because if your attitude is, ugh, time to make the podcast, well, that's not going to work. And that's usually because you didn't get enough sleep, because you're like, well, if you're getting more than, 4 hours of sleep, then you really don't want it.
You didn't edit your thumbnails long enough last night.
Yeah. And I'm like, no, that's not going to work either. You got to take care of yourself. And then if you have completely forgotten that you have a family, well, then they're going to start complaining, which is going to ruin your attitude again. And so you need your health, your attitude, and the support around you. And so I had a member of the School of Podcasting was saying how his spouse was starting to complain that they're podcasting too much. And I go, dude, that's a red flag. I go, look, I know we have fun when we're podcasting. I go, but when your family is saying, hey, like, remember me? I go, you might want to, go, it's time for a date night, leave the phones in the car, give that person your undivided attention. I go, cause that's not a good thing. So it's hard. That's the other thing. It's not like, oh, just do this, this, and this. Everything we just talked about, algorithms, the people in your family, those change, your circumstances change. So it's always a juggling act.
Yeah.
And that's, you're either gonna, you have to kind of embrace the chaos at times. So like, oh, all right, so my computer just bit the dust. Can I do everything on my phone? So we get to be creative.
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of this is about discovery and building an audience, which is it fair to say that's the number one challenge in a world of 4.5 million other podcasts?
Yeah, it's funny because I interviewed Jack from the Darknet Diaries, and this is a guy that's getting 6-figure downloads, probably 7 now. He's ridiculously popular. And I asked him, I go, like, what's your secret to growing your audience? And he goes, well, the first thing I did, he goes, is before I launched, and this is the part that always makes me scratch my head, but before he launched, he created a couple episodes and he had people listen to them and say, hey, how far did you listen? If you didn't listen to the whole thing, how far did you get and why did you stop? And then his big one was, on a scale from 1 to 10, how likely are you to tell a friend? And if he got a 7, he wasn't happy. He was shooting for 9s, 10s, maybe an 8, but a 7 was like, all right, I'm going back to the editing bay. And so he did that. And I don't understand. I understand why people don't get feedback on their first stuff, but you need to get feedback on your first stuff.
Right.
You might as well. And then I said, but how do you grow your show? And he said, well, what I do is I ask people to share it. And I go, well, what does that sound like? He'll be like, okay, well, today we were talking about, how we went to hack an Xbox and ended up hacking the Pentagon accidentally. And if you know somebody else who would like this story, could you do me a favor? Could you share it with a friend? And he goes, they're going to think you're cool because, well, you just shared this great content, and I'm going to win because I get to grow my audience, or just tell them to go to darknetdiaries.com. And I'm writing it down. And I'm like, okay, but what else do you do? And he goes, that's it.
Yeah.
So he made sure it was a good product, and then he asked people to share. And then I started listening to people because, like I said, when the whole Hall of Fame thing, I don't really want to mention, self-promotion makes us all weird.
Yep.
And so I started listening, and people would go, hey, like, maybe, I don't know, if you kind of want to, like, if there's somebody, like, you could tell them, the show, my website.com. Okay. All right. Thanks. And I was like, wow, that's a horrible pitch. And so he was slowly and specifically and confidently asking people to share the show. So it's not the 10,000 download golden switch, because we all want to just do this one thing and just walk in and there's our hockey stick growth again. But I was like, well, that makes sense, in a way. And I just watched a documentary on Netflix about, and I'm not like, you do you, but I'm not a wrestling person, but it was all about Vince McMahon. And they went through his whole thing when he started his own football league called the XFL. And this guy's a promoter. So he had all sorts of coverage and, the logo and the branding and, this is going to be the next big thing and we're going to take over and blah, blah, blah. There was only one problem. And that was the actual football. The playing of the football was horrible. The games were horrible. The product was horrible.
Yeah.
And so many times I think people focus on the tech, like what's the microphone and how am I going to do this and how am I going to do that? And I'm like, but in the end, nobody's saying, "Oh, Dave, you got to come listen to this podcast, man." I'm like, "Why?" "Oh, it's hosted on Captivate." Like that's not what people.
Right.
It's the content. And so, yeah, I know a lot of people say there's no discoverability. We need artificial intelligence to suggest shows. And I go, I actually have intelligence. I just watched a show called Join or Die on Netflix because Seth Wrestler, Wrestler is his last name. He's kind of the Pied Piper of podcasting for radio people because he came out of radio. And it's all about how we need communities. And when we don't have communities, you can see in history where things just fell apart. And I was like, he's like, so if you are running a community for your podcast, you have to watch this. So number one, I trust Seth. And then I watched it and I was like, oh, this is really good. So now I really trust Seth. But that's my algorithm, is my friends saying, hey, Dave, I bet you like this.
Right.
There's a guy on Netflix, Anthony Jeselnik, who does really dark comedy, like really dark. And my brother and I love that kind of stuff. And so I told my brother, I said, there's a comedian, it's got a new special on Netflix. Here's the link. You got to check it out. 3 hours later, that was the funniest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
So that's my algorithm, is people that know me.
Sure. Okay. So for this algorithm, okay, listen, YouTube, one quick tip to grow your audience: make good content and ask people to watch it.
Yeah, that's it. It really is.
Yeah.
Because look, the Mike Tyson fight that just happened with something
Jake Paul.
Jake Paul, yeah. And it was, we all watched it, and there's a lot of great reasons for that. We weren't sure. We always want to know what's going to happen next, right? Keeping people on the edge.
Yeah.
You have Mike Tyson, who's really unpredictable, and all this other stuff. Great. Product wasn't that good. So now when Jake Paul says, I'm going to fight somebody else, I don't know that I'm going to be tuning into that one.
Yeah, a lot of people watched episode 1. If there's a rematch, I don't think there'd be that many people watching episode 2.
That's it.
You know what? But and the interesting thing about that too is even talking about self-promotion, right?
Yeah.
Which, and self-promotion is different than promotion. There's a lot of, everything you hit on is correct, right? Like some people do, but generally speaking, there are reasons you might not want to beat your own chest. However, there's like this premise generally that like people don't want to be sold to. And in reality, it's the exact opposite for all the reasons that you just outlined, right? Like, if you told your brother, oh my God, I found this new comedy thing, you're going to love it. And he said, listen, I don't want to be sold to. I don't want to hear it.
Right.
No, thank you. Nobody says that. When you're genuinely like, I'm a trusted person to you, and I'm truly excited about this thing. Nobody ever says, sorry,
Right.
I don't want to know. Everybody, tell me more. Right? Whether that's a movie, whether that's a show, whether it's a new restaurant. You ate it. How was it? Like, tell me more. Sell me. I want to go there. Should I? Tell me. So it's like, it's the difference between the push-pull too.
I had a friend of mine, I'd known her for about 6 months, and she's like, can you help me launch a podcast? So I help her launch her podcast. Another 3 months in, I've listened to most of her episodes, and I'm like, how's the podcast going? She's like, actually, it's going really good. Numbers are going up. And she goes, but I'm not getting any speaking gigs out of it. And I go, speaking gigs? I go, I haven't known you that long. I'm like, I didn't know you were a speaker. And she's like, oh yeah, I speak to kids all the time. I just spoke in Brooklyn to a bunch of high school kids. And I go, that's really weird. I said, because I know you in person. And I said, I've listened to all your episodes. I've never heard you mention anything about speaking. And she went, of course, I kind of feel salesy. And I go, salesy, great. I go, like a used car salesman? And she goes, exactly. And I go, because that guy's selling you a bucket of bolts that might make it off the lot. And she goes, I know, it's like a guy from the 70s. And I go, exactly. And I go, so you're saying your podcast is a bucket of bolts? And she goes, no, I spent like 10 hours on that thing. And I go, so you're helping people? And she goes, yeah. She goes, that's the whole goal. And I go, so why are you stopping yourself from helping people? And she went, okay, you're good. And I go, but seriously, I go, you ready to promote your speaking gig? And she goes, yeah. And I go, start off the next episode. I was talking to a bunch of high school kids in the Bronx, and this one young man came up and asked me this question. And I thought, man, that'd be a great topic for the podcast. I go, done.
Yeah.
I go, your audience now knows, make sure you have a contact page on your website. Don't make them track you down on Twitter or Blue Sky or whatever. Have a contact page. I said, but it doesn't have to be this Sunday kind of thing. Just let people know what you do.
Yeah.
And she did, and she speaks all the time now. But it's that weird, would anybody really want to listen to me kind of thing or whatever? And just drop it in there. People are listening. They'll pick it up.
And there's something in there too about like when you start a podcast, it's helpful to know what your goal is.
Oh,
right.
There's two things. You have to know crystal clear who is my audience. Because if you don't entertain or educate that person, they're gone.
Yeah.
And you have to know your why. And your why could be, I want more clients. I want to be seen as a thought leader. I know people that just do a podcast as a diary and I just want to get it out into the world. I'm like, okay, whatever your reason is, you need to know your why, because if you don't get your why, you're going to burn out. You're like, well, I'm doing this thing. I'm not getting anything in return. And the hard part then is, what can I talk about that's going to educate or entertain the who while moving them towards my why? And that's the part that's kind of tricky and takes some thought into it. But yeah, people all the time, they'll go, well, I'm doing and I'm just going to make this up. I'm doing the Interesting Show where we interview interesting people with interesting stories. And I'm like, great. So you can do what? Like, what's the so you can? And maybe it's, I want them to laugh or think or be inspired or whatever. And I'm like, okay. But there was a time where that was like a trend. We want to inspire people. I'm like, to do what?
Yeah.
And so it gets kind of tricky. The other, we mentioned at the beginning, some of the things that people are kind of a red flag. When yes, a podcast is a conversation, but if you think about it, it's really a conversation with the boring parts removed. Because there are book editors and magazine editors and, movie, TV, they all have editors, and everybody thinks that what you're hearing is unedited. And maybe in the case of Joe Rogan, it's not, but I still think there are parts that probably are on the editing floor. But it's not just a conversation. It's a conversation with the boring parts removed. And I remember once I was in Nashville going to an event, and I was talking to this guy as we walked to the event. And he said, I just do it Rogan style. And I'm like, what's that? And he goes, we just set up a couple mics, me and my friends, and we just, talk about whatever we want to talk about. And I'm like, yeah, but the problem is, step one of that is be Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
And step number two is all of his friends are, I don't know, Adam Sandler, Will Ferrell, Tom Segura, like all these guys are other, celebrities.
Yeah.
Because the one day I was listening, he was talking to Adam Sandler, and I was like, I'm not really laughing at this. I'm like, why am I listening to this conversation? I'm like, oh, that's right. They're celebrities.
Yeah.
And celebrities kind of get a pass on being boring because we kind of want to get a glimpse behind the scene. But it's Rogan and Sandler just talking about, do you remember the Chuckle Hut out in Poughkeepsie? And like, oh man, who ran that thing? Dan. I'm like, I don't care about the Chuckle Hut in Poughkeepsie.
Right.
So,
but
it's tricky.
Even then, like, I think maybe it's deceiving because of his background. But like we're doing it Rogan style. Like, oh, so you prepared by being a stand-up comedian for the last 30 years.
Yeah.
And so you're just showing up and doing it? Like, you did that part, or you're just doing the showing up and doing it? Like,
yeah.
It takes a lot of experience to make it look like you're just winging it. You know what I mean? Yeah.
I got a lot of negative comments. I did a video once called How to Do a Podcast Like Joe Rogan. It was like, okay, step one in 1988.
Yeah.
Start your comedy career, and then there's, Fear Factor.
Oh, yeah, host a show on national television.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, that's all you have to do.
And he was wasn't he on, he was on radio?
He was News Radio.
News Radio, yeah.
He was on Fear Factor. He, for a while, hosted The Man Show when Adam Carolla and Jimmy Kimmel left. He was on that for a while. So, that's all. That's all he did.
It's like running for president in the Donald Trump style. Right? It's like,
so.
All you have to do is be a real estate billionaire and a personality and sell a few million books and be on NBC, and then you can just go up and say what you want, and that's what people will gravitate to. Like,
yeah.
It's that I've heard a few thousand versions of the story, right? But whether it was Picasso or somebody, but the old story of there's a guy, a famous artist in a coffee shop, and sketches a picture for somebody sitting at the next table, and somebody sees it and says, "Oh my God, can I buy that from you?" And he says, "Sure, it'll be, $100,000." And the person says, "What are you talking? $100,000? I watched you sketch that. It took you 10 minutes. It only took you 10 minutes." He said, "No, it took me 60 years to draw that."
Yeah.
Same idea, right? It's like you can't just show up unless you have a lot of experience just showing up.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the benefits of podcasting is you get really good at creating content. I spoke at an event in Indianapolis a couple months ago, and it was me and one of the other speakers there, and the event organizer. He's like, "Hey, since we're here on video, can you just spit out some quick 30-second, clips that we can use on social?" And I was like, I think I used one as peanut butter and jelly because the other speaker there, and I spit out like 4, and the other speaker was like, "How do you do that?" And I go, 20 years, just doing it. It's everybody makes it look easy,
Yeah.
and so it's one of those things where that's why I love now when I remember I was at an event and a speaker didn't show up, and they said, "Can you just go in and like riff on this subject?" And I go, "Absolutely." And people were floored that I just walked in and, it's when you have the experience and the stories to tell, but I couldn't have done that back in 2005. I'd been like, "Are you kidding?
Sure.
I need my slides."
But on the flip side, there is such a thing as being over prepared, right? Like there's so many shows that lose their life and personality because people have sort of taken the spontaneity out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I do a live show on Saturday called Ask the Podcast Coach, and it was started over 10 years ago because I wanted to play with Blog Talk Radio. And then when I went to quit, the audience is like, "What are you doing? Like, you're the new Saturday morning cartoons." But half the fun of that show is I have like 6 or 7 questions ready to answer in the event absolutely nobody shows up.
Yep.
But the fun of that show is we just go wherever the chat room wants to go. And so that is definitely one of those, "Oh, I wonder what's going to happen next" kind of moments because it's all over the place. It's an editing nightmare. And that is one where I just have to realize that I say the word when I don't know what I'm going to say. 20 years later, I'm still an machine. And I'm like, so I just, I did the old, for those that remember Laverne and Shirley, I'm going to start announcing that Ask the Podcast Coach is recorded live in front of an online audience. And then I can maybe get away with less editing. We'll see.
Yeah. I used to say, like, I am my filler words. Like, if you get rid of my filler words, then you're losing me.
Yeah, that's it.
That I want to dive into the Laverne and Shirley disclaimer because I'm going to take you down the rabbit hole here.
Okay.
At Podcast Movement, I heard the word disclaimer come up around AI.
Ah, okay.
And what I felt that 2 or 3 days that show was on was a very wide range of emotions around AI, from this is the greatest thing ever to like this is the end of the world. And the this is the end of the world people were very much talking about things like disclaimers and I guess podcast is an art, and people, and within an art you have artists and artistes, and those artistes like the purity of the medium sometimes, and I just couldn't wrap my head around even the premise of the disclaimer. Like, what would the disclaimer be? And why do we need it? Because I guess it must be that we think the audience, if they're tuning into the podcast, is expecting it to be unedited or something, or something different than other forms of entertainment. Like the example I always use is like at the start of the movie in Star Wars, they give you a disclaimer to say, just so you know, this didn't happen in space. No droids were actually harmed during the filming of this movie. Like there's a suspension of disbelief that happens when you consume movie or television. Like, by the way, just so everybody knows, Seinfeld was not shot in one take, and they actually had multiple cameras, and then there were editors, and those weren't the words that they chose to say. There was actually a script. Like, there is so much of like, of course you have to, like, this album that you listen to, guess what? Not all the people playing the music were the musicians in the band. Like, it's just, that's how art is today. And maybe it's because it's new and different, but I felt overwhelmed by this premise that, like, we need to tell people what technology we're using. Do we need to?
I think the part, because I'm with you, I can, if you get me in the right mood, I'll jump on any one of these because I can see the point from all sides. I think the part that gets weird is, I forget what I was using, Google LM, so Kyle and Sheila are back. And at the time, I had a story where I'd actually lost my wallet for about 3/4 of a day, and some kind stranger brought it back with my money in it, which I thought was amazing. And I don't know why I was using Google LM for this, but for some reason they're talking about my story. And Sheila says, I remember once when I lost my wallet, it was scary. And I'm like, but Sheila, you don't exist. You're not a person.
Yeah.
And that's when I went, that seems to cross the line, because if somebody doesn't know that Kyle and Sheila are fake, they might really have a really, like, I feel like Sheila gets me. When I listen to Sheila, she's talking to me. And I was like, so then I kind of go, yeah, that seems a little weird, because later when they find out that Kyle and Sheila are just technology, they don't exist at all, they're not even people, that person might be hurt. And I never want to hurt people. But on the other hand, I feel like I know Rachel. I feel like I know Ross.
I was going to say, where do they find out George Costanza doesn't work for the Yankees?
Right, exactly. So that's where I'm like, yeah, but, you know, nobody on Friends was real. The people that played them were real. But I think the difference there is, we know that Rachel is really Jennifer Aniston. Like, we're in on the deal.
But why do we know that?
Because at the beginning of the intro, it says, you know, and they're dancing around the pool and it has their name on it.
Right.
But it's kind of weird. To me, I don't think we have to disclaim, like, oh, this automated voice was done using 11 Labs. And even that's the part where I go, well, we're kind of splitting hairs now, because I remember once I wrote a script that I was going to read. And I thought, well, let's see if the audience can tell the difference. So I put it into 11 Labs, where I'd cloned my voice and took that audio and put it in. And the first story was me reading it. The second one was 11 Labs, where my voice was a little deeper for some reason. And then the third one was me and nobody noticed it. But, like, does it matter who reads the script if it's my script? What I think is weird, and this happens, this is available right now. Mike Russell is a guy who runs a company that does voiceover. Mm-hmm. And so he saw the writing on the wall. He goes into a feed reader, I think it's Feedly, and if he puts a check mark on it via Zapier or something, it sends that blog post to Google Docs. Google Docs then sends it to 11 Labs, where RoboMike then reads it and sends the audio to, if I remember right, it was SoundCloud. And I go, why SoundCloud? I'm like, that's the horrible choice for a media host. It's the only one that worked with Zapier. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
But it was RoboMike reading blog posts about AI. And if you didn't know that, you know, it wasn't really Mike, you might not, and this was probably a year and a half ago. It's probably much better now, because back then it was pretty obvious that it was RoboMike. And that's where part of me goes, well, A, you're reading somebody else's content. Whoever wrote that blog post, you know, are they getting credit for that? That's always a weird thing, especially if you're monetizing it. You're like, what are the rights on that blog post? So to me, it's all a little muddy, because I can kind of see there's a part of me that goes, well, if I'm still getting good content that makes me laugh, cry, think, grow, and educate or entertain, do I care that a robot told me?
Right.
But I also have seen people that will absolutely strip the personality out of their show by using a bunch of AI voices.
Right.
So I don't have an official, like I said, I can see every side of the story. I just don't know.
Yeah. And I think part of it is maybe the idea that there's a bait and switch that happens because people are thinking about a show that was them. Right. So the audience is tuned in for N number of episodes and downloads where it was them. And now you're talking about slipping in changing it to not them, as opposed to I started a show, it's always been an AI voice. What
Right.
trick are you pulling on the audience? Probably none, really.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's still a hidden thing in there, which is like but people think because it's my podcast, they're getting me. Like going back to something you said earlier, I don't want to be the first person to tell you this. Just so you know, though, the ninja on Ask a Ninja was not a ninja.
What?
I know.
What?
There was no disclaimer.
That's true.
It was never stated, but I just hate to be the one to tell you he was not actually a ninja.
My whole day is ruined.
Not only that, the person on camera was not the person who wrote it. Again, I hate to tell you. Do you feel offended?
No.
Do you feel bamboozled?
See, that's a really good point. Every TV show has writers.
Ask a Ninja had a writer. Kent was behind the scenes doing. I mean, they shared the writing, but like the person you saw was not the person writing the content, and was definitely not a ninja. But if it was an AI ninja, now you've been somehow manipulated as the listener. That's the part that I had a hard time wrapping my head around. Is people are like filtering a very specific format into. Well, you need to tell people the truth about what's happening.
And is this just, the curmudgeons, right? I mean, we all talk about grandpa, like, I used to walk to school uphill both ways in the snow.
I had to record this podcast for 90 minutes. What do you mean you didn't? And
so now it's like, well, we found this new way to do it. It's easier. And this thing just spits out a script. And I just, have this other thing. Well, that's not the way you do, I remember Dana Carvey had the grumpy old man on Saturday Night Live. You know? He was like, back in the day, we didn't have fancy latex condoms, we wrapped a trash bag around it and tied it off with a bungee cord, So maybe that's part of this. They're just like, well, that's not how you do it. You do it this way.
Right. Well, so the analogy that comes to my mind, and you've already given the disclaimer. You were of a generation that will remember this. Music died as soon as Pro Tools came along, and you couldn't record on analog tape anymore. That was the end of music as we knew it. There would be no more musicians. There would be no more audio engineers.
Right.
Nobody would record another album ever again. There probably should be disclaimers. Technology is going to come in and totally remove the purity that is music, or not. Or it's just the same people now recording on Pro Tools, and the engineers who used to engineer on tape are now engineering on Pro Tools, and the musicians are the same. And like, maybe it's just the generic, oh my God, the technology is coming, we need to be afraid cycle.
Well, and the VCR was going to kill the movie industry. Nobody will go to the movies anymore. There's a time. I remember when my cousin got cable, and I was like, they're paying for TV. Why would you pay for TV? It's free. It's so dumb. And now you can't get me to watch free TV. Everything I watch is paid for.
Every time I go down this analogy road, I instantly regret it, because then I'm like, well, what am I not saying? Oh, yeah. And the internet's going to kill the record business. Oh,
yeah.
Oops. Got one.
Oops. Yeah.
that one hit. What I've come around to, and I'll let you weigh in how you feel. It's just early, and everybody's afraid of what the future is going to be. But and even the fear, right? Somebody's told me on a previous episode that like people are worried about losing their jobs, and I'm like, the job that probably they only have because of the invention of the microprocessor and the mobile phone, they're now worried about losing because a new technology has come along. Like, the one thing we know, technology keeps coming along, GDP keeps going up. There are more and more people working in every country on Earth today than in the history of the world, just based on the math of the population growth. So technology continues to not be a way that people stop working. They might not do the same job, right? They might not do the same job, but so it might stop you from doing what you're doing today, but it will certainly empower you to do another job better than you were previously able to do it. Like, there's no chance AI is, at least the current version of AI is
right.
Going to displace that.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think I've heard the saying, AI is not going to take your job. The person who knows how to use AI
yes,
is going to take your job. And I think that's more accurate. I don't, I still, there are times like when I go to a parking lot and there's no attendant, I'm like, were we paying the attendant so much that that's where we cut corners? But I'm like, On the other hand, the guy's not sitting in a booth bored out of his gourd. He's probably doing something much better. So
Right.
who knows? But I'm with you. It's
Well-
early, you know.
And there's a ... to, and I use that analogy too, right? Like AI is not going to replace lawyers. It's going to replace lawyers who don't use AI. But then there's a ... which is, but then the lawyers who use AI are going to have a little more disposable income, and they're going to spend it on this new thing, and that thing's going to need people to work for it. And like it's not as it doesn't end up as a zero sum game, right?
Yeah.
For every one lawyer who uses AI that puts a lawyer who doesn't use AI, quote unquote, out of business, it also creates 3 new opportunities in the market.
Well, and it speeds things up. I mean, I use Perplexity is a search engine, and I think ChatGPT is doing this now, but it gives you its sources. So I said, is it true that putting your keywords at the beginning of your podcast title is a good practice? I forget exactly what the prompt was. And it said, yes. And then it gave me like 5 different SEO articles, none of them said that exactly.
Yeah.
Which I was kind of like, I needed the source to say, here, according to SEMrush, you know, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, Perplexity is one I use a lot now because that was my whole thing. I don't want AI destroying my credibility. There was an article on a media host site, and it was talking about the discoverability problem in podcasting. And it said discoverability in podcasting goes back to the 90s. And I went, yeah, that would be a big problem to discover.
I also couldn't have discovered a podcast in the 90s. I agree.
And it was really long, and I went, oh, this is AI. Somebody didn't realize, they didn't know the topic, and so they just took that at its face value. So, yeah, that's, to me, the lawyer is going to he's going to hire a staff now to fact check the results.
Well, I mean, not to date the episode in particular, but have you seen the story about the lawyer who did?
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where, like even today, the language models, they're good at facts, maybe, but they're not good at meaning. Like humans are meaning machines. Like if we're good at I'll concede that the internet or the search engine or the LLM is better at facts than I am. You can ask it anything and it'll give you an answer in 2 seconds. I can't do that. But to take that fact and turn it into something that has real meaning, they can't do. And it's almost like the facts or the knowledge versus wisdom argument, right? Which is like my favorite quote is, knowledge is knowing that tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is not pulling it in a fruit salad. It's like that sort of thing, right? Is it can take this article and it said, oh yeah, this article said, podcasts have been, I found this one reference that mentioned the 1990s in podcasts, therefore you haven't been able to do the thing. It's like, well, probably the knowledge that you use to apply that is not, you did not get the right meaning from that knowledge.
Yeah.
And I don't see a world where this current generation of AI really does anything other than make people's jobs easier. My favorite AI prompt, I should give it to you since so you give it your prompt, you get your response. Then the most important prompt is, are you sure?
Nice.
And then inevitably, whether it's Perplexity or ChatGPT, it says, you're right to question my first answer. Blah, 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 blah. So
one of my favorite prompts after doing a live show where I've kind of prepped, but not really, I will go, based on this transcript, what were the companies mentioned and what websites were mentioned? Because for me, show notes are 90% links. What did we talk about? Because somebody's like, oh, that sounded really cool. And then they go to the show notes and there's no link.
Right.
And that saved me hours of having to listen to the episode again. And it's just a matter of, I have to trust that it didn't miss one. And so far it hasn't. So we'll see. But you mentioned, search engines versus, AI. And it's interesting because Google won that, versus Netscape and Ask Jeeves and all the other ones back there because it gave better results.
Right.
And Google's now going to lose because their results are the whole front page now. Almost the whole thing now is ads. So you have to go to like page 2 to find anything organic. And I'm like, wow, they're going to lose the same way they won, which was just deliver a better product.
Yeah. Which takes us back to your podcast comment, right? Which is like, at the end of the day, what's going to separate, something that's good at this or something that's bad from it, a good show from bad show, is whether the content is what your audience is looking to get. And whether it's the AI, whether it's the search engine, all of that's just a gimmick. It doesn't matter. Like ChatGPT could be cool, or Perplexity could be cool if it gave you the information you weren't looking for. You're gonna stop using it. You're gonna be like,
Right.
this is not giving me what I actually want. It's still buzzwordy. Like, I found it because of the buzzword. I want to use it because of the buzzwords. But somewhere underneath it, there's got to be the meat and potatoes, or else you're just gonna go back to what you were doing before.
Well, Tom Webster has, and I just have it here, has a book called The Audience is Listening, a little guide to building a big podcast. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. And he said an exercise you might try is record your podcast per normal and then transcribe it. And he goes, and you will see every imperfection. And he goes, so change that. And Tom's a scripting guy. He likes to read a script. He goes, so fix the script and then read the fixed one. And I was like, and Tom has the pipes for this and the delivery. I don't know that everybody can read a script, but that's where, to me, I don't know that AI could tell the story. One podcast I know of is called Adoptees On, and it's all about being adopted. And because the only people that really know what it's like to be adopted are people that are adopted.
Yeah.
And I was talking to the host of that show, and she said, yeah, she goes, you realize that we all see the after school special, and I've been looking for you my entire life, and she said, sometimes there are people that spend years finding their biological parents only to be rejected again. And I was like, that hurts just to say that. And so I could see, I don't know that AI could do anything that emotional and that kind of thing. So that's where the personal side comes in.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I know I edit a podcast for people that do brain surgery. And a lot of these people, English is not their first language. And it would be interesting to have them answer the question and then do the script thing and go, hey, can you just read this? Because they are just, there are ums that we can ignore.
Yeah.
But when there are like 40 ums in a 2-minute segment, like we need some editing there. Now it's distracting. That's to me when ums are too many. But there are definitely parts where, especially if English or whatever language is not your first language, and now with HeyGen, have you played with that yet?
No, what's HeyGen?
HeyGen is, number one, you can now clone yourself as a video. And when you go to the website, they have a picture of the CEO, and then it turns out that he's got a little video there in the bottom right-hand corner, and halfway through the video goes, oh, by the way, this isn't me.
Yeah.
And you're like, wait, what? But you can also then have it translate into another language. So when I work at Libsyn, I have a clip of me somewhere speaking German. And it's, podcast, and I was like, that's freaky, And so now they have it to where not only can they change the verbiage, they can just clone you. And I started to sign up.
Yeah.
And I went,
whoa,
I don't know that I want a visual version of me. That's one where I went, I cloned my grandpa's voice. That was kind of freaky.
Yeah.
Because I asked my brother, I go, what do you want grandpa to say to you? And he's like, what voodoo are you working with? And as I realize now, that's kind of against the terms. You have to only clone your own voice. But
okay.
It was fun. And because I had an old cassette of grandpa reading the Christmas story. So I cleaned it up. I was like, wow, this sounds really good. And I was like, ooh, can you clone
New
grandpa?
idea.
Yeah. So it was interesting, and I made my brother cry.
There you go. Probably not the first time that you've done something interesting. Maybe the first time it's made your brother cry, but
that's it.
So I think what I'm hearing is AI can do a lot of stuff. It probably can't make a great podcast today on its own.
Well, one point on that, I always love the person that wants to be a thought leader, and they have ChatGPT write the script, and I'm like, yeah, but ChatGPT, I think the last time I checked, only goes to like 2023 or something like that. Like, it's not the latest, greatest stuff. And I'm like, you can't use, in my opinion, right? Like, I'm not sure I'm going to let ChatGPT, like, if I want to be the thought leader thinking outside the box, I go,
ChatGPT, think outside the box.
Yeah, it's not going to work.
So what does make a great podcast for you? Because we've talked a lot about what makes a podcast. What makes a podcast great? For
me, I did a self-study of one, but for about 2 weeks, I wrote down everything I read, listened, or watched. And then I was like, why? Why did you watch this? So it turns out it either made me laugh, cry, think, groan, educate, or entertain. And then I noticed that most of the shows I love Last Week Tonight with John Oliver.
Yeah.
All right, so it's information I can't get anyplace else. He's making me laugh because he's talking politics. I'm probably going to groan, and the whole time I'm like, why aren't they talking about this on the real news? Why is all the really fascinating news on a comedy show? Why is it on The Daily Show or that show or things like that? This Is Us was a show that made me laugh and cry a lot. And it also kind of sparked nostalgia. That would be another one. Sometimes people just like to listen about the good old days,
Mm-hmm.
So, but when you don't make people laugh, cry, think, groan, educate, or entertain, and it's not information you can't get anyplace else, there's a word for that, and it's called boring. And I'm like, it really boils down to don't be boring. It's really two ingredients. It's the content and the delivery.
Yep.
So you could have amazing content, but if I deliver to you like this, and I'm sound like I'm in a tin can, it's just the song, like that's not going to work. But on the other hand, you could have amazing content that sounds horrible, or you could have the best tech in the world, but the content is crap. That's not going to work either. It's really a combination of the two.
Yeah.
And so it's I've heard shows. I remember once, it was the early days of podcasting, and it was a show made for people that teach computer software to other people. And I'm like, oh, this is tailor-made for me. The guy spent, and I gave up after 7 minutes, talking about how much he hated Bob Seger. That was the opening of the show. And it just sounded like it was recorded underwater. And I was like, but I actually sat through 7 minutes of him ranting about Bob Seger thinking, yes, but he's going to talk about this subject that I really want to hear. And so that was one where the content was bad and the delivery was bad. And I am still amazed that I lasted 7 minutes, but I just remember going, yeah, okay, I'm done.
Yeah. Okay. So stay away from Bob Seger if you want to make a good podcast.
Yeah. And it stems from knowing who your audience is.
Right.
And that's where you can cheat. You can go to YouTube, type in the subject of your podcast, go for the most popular result of that, and then go into their videos and sort by most popular, and you'll have an idea of what this audience, at least for this particular YouTuber, is talking about. That'll give you an idea of that, but then go read the comments, because that's where you go, oh, I really love this show, but you didn't talk about this, or vice versa. And you can do the same thing at Amazon. Look at Amazon reviews of a book, and it's interesting because sometimes you can't win. Somebody be like, I think this book is way too technical for the average whatever person, blah, blah, blah. And then you'll have another person 2 reviews down go, this needed to be more technical. It wasn't technical enough. So that's where you have to figure out, okay, well, what do you want to talk about? Because you have to love talking about it. Because when you first start off, you're talking to almost nobody. And you have to love the subject so much that you'll talk about it to almost nobody for no money and spend lots of time doing it. So that's where that passion comes into play.
Before we wrap up, I do have a two-part question for you. The first is, go back in the Wayback Machine to 2005. 20 years on-ish. Are we where we thought you would be? Or have we surpassed that? Are we behind it?
Well, I guess. See, you said at the beginning of this, you said, if you don't know who Dave Jackson, how is it even possible, or something like that. That was the goal. I wanted to be the guy for podcasting. And I just was like, I'd seen so many things come and go that I was like, ooh, I should have jumped on that. Ooh, I should have jumped on that. And when I saw this coming, I'm like, this is the thing I'm jumping on. So it's weird because I still feel like nobody knows me. You know what I mean? It's like, because I'm here in my spare bedroom and things like that. So that's that. Now, the thing I didn't realize is a lot of my students go on to graduate from the School of Podcasting and then become my competition, which is fun. But I always say that's fine. I'm not bitter, but I thought, because I have an affiliate program, I thought they would just go, oh, instead of, oh, I'll teach you that, they would point people to me.
Yeah.
So that's fine. I plus the people that are asking them about podcasting, they have a relationship with that person anyway. So it makes sense for them to teach that. But yeah, and that's one of those things when I got the award in 2018, I'm like, well, where do I go from here? Like, isn't this like, this is what you win as you retire or something? And I was like, where do I go from here? So I don't know. I just love it. I keep doing it. About the time, I think it's like, oh, okay, here's another question about what's the best microphone under $100. Then some new technology will come out or something to kind of spice things up. Or I'll just hear somebody that I have a segment on my show called Because of My Podcast. And somebody will be like one of my members did a show called My Spouse Has Dementia. And as you might imagine, her source of information passed away, but she has the show still up. And she sent me a thing. She said, she got featured in U.S. News and World Report about dealing with grief over the holidays.
Mm.
And she's had just multiple people contact her and said, and again, information you can't get anyplace else. Alzheimer's on TV is, oh my gosh, I forgot my keys. Am I getting Alzheimer's? Where the disease is nasty. It's beyond. There's adult diapers involved and all sorts of other things. And she's like, no, I want to talk about the real disease and give people a heads up of here's what's coming your way.
Yeah.
And so when I hear somebody say, I got this email from somebody or I got a voicemail from somebody and I really touched them, like I didn't do that, but there's a little bit of my DNA that somehow inspired that person to go out and do that. And that puts a lot of gas in my tank.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It seems like it's one thing for like that direct reward, but then you have the, like in sports, it's like you have the coaching tree.
Yeah.
Like everybody sort of comes from somewhere and they sort of take pride in everybody's accomplishments that happens over the generations of coaches. I imagine it's the same for podcasts.
Yeah.
Second part of that question, let's flip it to podcasting in general. So we're now in 2025. Paint a picture of podcasting in 2030. In 5 years from now, how different does it look than today?
I could really see it being, especially for hyper local news, where instead of tuning into TV, they just copy and paste the story from whatever service they're using. They paste it in, AI reads it and sends it out via RSS, if they haven't killed RSS by then, I could see literally, again, because if we go back to, well, in the end, I've got to get this copy from this service that did the reporting to people. And I could see just going, oh, here, copy, paste. And you just, during the day, I get things from the woman in the tube from Amazon all the time about what's going on. That could easily be it for part of it. That's going to be, I think we're going to see a jump to local people because that's the one thing. There are people doing it now, but I used to deliver the paper when I was, a teenager here, and it's a pamphlet now. It's not really a newspaper. And I could just see that's a hole. There are things not being reported on that probably should be.
Yeah.
And I could see podcasting, maybe that'll be the next wave of just hyper local shows.
Last question. This is the important question.
Oh boy.
Desert island.
Mm.
Battery powered generator, solar, battery, something. Only enough juice and only enough satellite internet service to download one podcast to listen to on the desert island every day or as frequently as it comes out.
So it's a new episode. Oh, hands down, No Agenda show with Adam Curry and John C. Dvorak. There's one.
There you go.
Information you can't get anyplace else.
Yep.
Delivered in an entertaining way. A lot of sound effects in that show, but it makes you laugh and it makes you think. A lot of thinking in there that you're like, wait, they're doing what? Because they have a very global audience, and when you get news about the U.S. outside of the U.S., it's completely different.
Yeah.
So they try to stay neutral. They're a little right leaning, but they've been a little left leaning in the past. So they try to they report on the news and then call BS on stuff, like the fact that a lot of news reports are like, this is up 38%. Like, yeah, but if that went from like 2 to 7, that's, or whatever. It's like, what are the actual numbers? What are we talking here about? 48% of the cows have this thing. Like, yeah, but how many cows is that? Is that, yes. Are we talking
of all the sick dairy cows, female sick dairy cows, 10% more this year were sick with this.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know what that means.
Yeah. So it's a entertaining show. So yeah, that would be the one That's the one that when it comes out on Thursdays and Sundays, like that's the one I go, ooh, is it available yet? So it's a fun show.
Awesome. All right. Well, we'll leave it there with that recommendation. Dave Jackson, thank you so much for your time. This was illuminating as expected, and I hope you had a great time too.
Oh, always, Matt. Thanks so much, man.
Cheers.
Another round, so much more to talk about. Gonna aim to satisfy with help from CacheFly. Get to it fast. Right here on the Anycast. Make it strong, make it last. Right here on the Anycast. The Anycast podcast, brought to you by CacheFly.